Elyse Schunkewitz and Sara Berger, thank you two so much for being on the podcast. How's it
Thank you for
going?
having us.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
having us. So excited.
Yeah. This is an exciting one. I know Schunkewitz, I've been wanting you to come on again since our last one. And like we started having the conversation of you and Sara, and then I think maybe it was Sara who brought up the idea of pain, but
Yeah.
it's a great one, brilliant. I think it's something that everyone can relate to in some sense. But before we dive into that, do you two want to just Elise reintroduce yourself and Sara introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. So thank you for having me back. So my name is Elyse Schunkewitz. I am a licensed clinical social worker and brain-based personal trainer. So I combine a bunch of different modalities that pull from mind, body, and brain approaches into treating people in a holistic approach in primarily psychotherapy, but addressing, 360, the entire person in front of me. So that's what I do in my practice. I work with, similarly to Sara, I work with a lot of people who have kind of quote unquote tried everything and haven't found a lot of success in more conventional or Western medical modalities. And outside of my practice, I am a primary clinician in the Bellevue Hospital Psychiatric Emergency Room and Mobile Crisis Team. And also, Sara and I have a business together called Talk Nerdy to Me, where we teach and facilitate brain-based workshops.
Very cool. And Sara, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I am a Washington, D.C. based neurocentric Pilates instructor, but I identify as a healer. Pilates is the meat of what I do, and it's the foundation. But I also have the functional neurology education in addition to I just finished doing my Reiki certification. So I really do approach my clients from a body, mind, and spirit. So similar to Elyse, looking at it from a holistic approach. It's not just through movement, it's through looking at the brain, looking at energy. So as Elyse was saying, we get those clients that they've gone to everyone else and they just can't get the answers that they're looking for. And we help them be more active in their life and participate in their life as fully as they want. So that's always my goal. And outside of my practice, I enjoy rock climbing and anything in nature.
Very cool. Very cool. I think one thing that you both touched upon that I think is just really huge is just the fact that there are people who have been tried the more conventional route of resolving whatever issue that they may have, and that not working, and then they come to you and you guys look at it through a more holistic lens of not just from a Western science type of outlook, but also through spiritual and all these other things. um when it comes to pain, like how do you guys like look at it through, I guess, more of a holistic lens?
Yeah. So for me, when I'm looking at pain, I think the common thing that we see, and I'm sure everyone that's listening or watching can relate to this. I have pain here. I must have done this. I must have like overworked my shoulder when I was doing X task, right? Or I should go get an X-ray. There must be something wrong. And the thing is there's a common phrase that we say in the pain world, the neuro world, is like, the pain is not where the problem is. Unless you have a specific injury. If you just got in a car accident and you broke your arm, if you're having pain in your arm, it's because there's damage to your arm, absolutely. But unless there's an acute injury to bone or tissue, the pain is not where the problem lies. So it's always about really gaining a comprehensive history and understanding of where your client's been and where they are now, because the brain remembers everything. That's how it survives, is by keeping this data and using that data to predict and make decisions. So you have an entire lifetime inside of here that the brain is utilizing. So we need to understand, you know, surgeries, we need to understand medication history, and all those things. So it's really looking at not just what's happening right now, but what has happened through your entire lifetime, really.
Right. And Elyse, before I move on, is there something that you want to add to that?
Yeah, going off of what Sarah said, pain lives in the brain. So, we have receptors, and we have things, parts of our body that take an input, but ultimately the experience of pain is coming from our brain. So, when Sarah and I, every workshop we teach, we start with a very basic Neuro 101, which I can't remember if I talked about in the podcast that you interviewed me on, but essentially we have inputs, and we receive so many inputs throughout the days. We receive inputs through our visual system, through our hearing, through our vestibular system, through receptors on our skin that tell us if something is hot or cold or sharp or dull, receptors in our tendons and our ligaments. We take those inputs in, we process them, we make a decision, and we create an output. And ultimately, what Sarah and I are when we think about pain, we're looking to see pain, we're thinking about pain as an output of the nervous system, and we're looking at those inputs and the processing that's going on in the body to figure out what might not be working well that could be causing pain as an output. And we'll get more into this, as we continue the conversation, but pain isn't just always physical discomfort in the body. Pain can be migraines, TMJ, depression, anxiety, ADHD, eating disorders, substance abuse. Pain is just really, I explain it as it's an umbrella term for what I call unwanted output from the nervous system.
No, yeah, totally. And what are your thoughts, your both thoughts in regards to, I guess, the distinguishable factors between emotional pain and physical pain? And I guess the difference in regards to how our brains uh, react to that or deal with it?
Yeah. Well, so as Elyse was saying, pain lives in the brain and it's an output. It's a call for change. And the brain can't distinguish between what is an emotional component and what is a physical component. So the brain's number one job is to survive, right? Survival of you, but also survival of us as a species. So in order to survive, the brain is constantly assessing not only the internal environment, but our external environment to let us to be aware of anything that could be a potential danger to the system. Okay, that's why our eyes are so important, because it can see that, tiger coming after us. Obviously, not many of us would find ourselves in that situation, but that's very, caveman like. I don't know, people do adventurous things. You never know, right?
Yeah.
So when you have an emotional experience that causes you pain and that's threatening, that's seen as a threat, the brain doesn't know that that's different than, a physical thing where you just bumped your elbow or your visual system isn't working properly or there's a vestibular. So in the brain, pain is pain. Now, the way that we see that output of pain, as Elyse was saying, it's not always just a pain. It can be depression. It can be like the TMJ, as she was saying.
Right. And what are your thoughts in regards to, I guess, um, generationally, how we perceive pain and how we deal with pain? Because, like, one thing, that like, this is just my own opinion, but I feel like, when you look at previous generations and, what they went through, and, you can call it pain, you can call it adversity, whatever you want. There was and I guess we talked about this kind of in our episode, at least,
Yeah.
grit, um, that seems to have deteriorated as the generations have, you know, come up to the time that we're in today. Like, do you think that that's kind of, I guess, in correspondence to, nature and nurture, and like the fact that, there's less adversity uh, in this current time frame versus in the past?
That's a really complex question.
Yeah.
There's, do you want to take that, Elyse? I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I don't know if you want to start.
I do too. So I can't remember if I was reading this book when you interviewed me, Julian, but there's a book called It Didn't Start With You that talks about inherited family trauma. And really, I mean, it's just so interesting how generationally things can be inherited and right brought down, continued down the line, but it could be energetically, it could be in the way that, right, your parent was raised in a certain way, so now they're raising you very similarly to that way because that's what they know. um yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of energy work on myself, and I've learned that I've inherited some things that I would consider pain, and not necessarily, like we said, like physical pain in the body, but certain emotional experiences that I'm having that may not be that I directly experienced them in my life, but maybe I inherited that in my, in my genes, in my body, like it's been passed down, maybe energetically, maybe spiritually. I haven't really, I haven't gone too far down that road. I'm just starting to scratch the surface, but I think it's really interesting stuff. But I definitely want to hear what you have to say, Sarah.
Yeah, so I have two lanes that I want to speak to on this, and I think one is going to the physical, and I think really it's because we have a better understanding now, thanks to science and research, of what pain is. Growing up, we heard like no pain, no gain, right? If you can't walk the next day after your workout, well, that's a good thing. Those are gains, right? And now that we have a more comprehensive understanding of what pain is, we know that actually pain is detrimental, because pain, like anything, can be learned. And we don't want to learn pain because there's so many impacts to it. Touching on what Elyse said from an emotional standpoint, I think that, like, from my own experience, similar to Elyse, that people didn't talk about their pain, right? Like, so I grew up in a really religious household where you pray about it. You pray about that loss and God's going to fix it for you. So I wasn't taught to actively change things in my life, to change behaviors, to change situations, to understand my role, because it was somebody else's responsibility, and that responsibility was God's, right? And that's how my mother was raised. So she learned that that's how you handle emotional pain. My mom went through an immense amount of trauma in her life. And because she did not deal with that pain, because you didn't do that, right? Therapy was taboo. She taught me coping mechanisms and behaviors that then led to my own pain, because I saw, like, this is how we deal with the situation. So by not addressing her pain, she then caused me a lot of pain, particularly in like relationships with people,
Right.
and how I handled that. So there is this passing on, and I don't think that it's like there's less adversity. I think that we're just being more honest, and we're being vulnerable, and we're saying, you know what, we're going to release this, because we don't have to live in pain. We don't have to live a life where we feel caged, where we can't release what has happened in our mental and physical state. Like, we're evolving in that area. So I don't think there's less adversity. I just think that we're more open to sharing and healing.
Right. Yeah. And to clarify, when I say less adversity, I mean more so through the pragmatic lens of, starvation is pretty much non-existent anymore in the world. War, basically, like when you look at any other time in human history, like this is the
Yeah.
most peaceful time ever. So there are of course adversities, but I think the thing I was trying to get to is that a lot of times like, especially today, when you look at the situation in which we live in, there are things that of course are inconvenient, but a lot of times people try to exacerbate it to the point where this is the worst time to live on the face of the earth, or like everyone's racist, like more racist now than they've ever been. It's like,
Yeah.
no, calm down. Things are actually not bad. Can it be better? Absolutely. But like, I don't know. I just feel like other generations, it's like they had it worse, but yet they like had this level of determination and grit where they were like, yes, it's not great. What am I gonna do about it? But then like a lot of times you hear people in this generation go, things are shit and I don't want to do anything. So, so like,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
from an emotional standpoint and everything, I think it's totally great that people are being more and more transparent in regards to like, hey, I don't have my shit together. I need therapy. I want to work on my things. My energy levels and is negative. All those things. I think that part I think is positive, and like I'm totally in line with you. And on that point, I was more focusing on the other end of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, we often say to people, well, if they're going through an emotional experience that's causing them pain, well, think of people that live in this country. It's not that bad. You don't have it that bad. And I think, it's perspective. Like, so we don't know what it was like to grow up in the Great Depression. So I think that our idea of what is challenging in life is just skewed, right? And I think that in a lot of ways, there's like, it just changes, right? Like, I would not want to be a kid today and deal with social media and that type of pressure and emotional pain. Like, I know it's not the same, but I think it's just the times change, and therefore, what we view as challenging changes.
What are your thoughts, Shunkowitz?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I actually think this is a nice segue into us talking about something called the threat bucket, which Sarah and I reference a lot, because even though our modern culture today does not face the stressors of where are we going to find food, where are we going to find shelter, we're actually seeing that people are under longer, like they're under the stress hormones are pumping in their body, the cortisol and adrenaline are pumping in their body for way longer periods of time that is healthy. So like, prior, when people were looking for food, they'd have those stress hormones in their body to help them focus, to help them have energy, to help them go find those sources of food and kill it, the sources of food, so they could have nutrition. But now, and then those stress hormones would start to decrease in the body. Now what we're seeing is that even though we don't have, like, our perception of threat has changed, and now we're seeing that a lot of people are under constant states of threat and stress, to the point that it's causing a lot of chronic pain in all different ways, emotional, physical, however you want to define it. But we have a concept called the threat bucket from Z Health. That Z Health is the program that Sarah and I met in. That actually Sarah explains it really well. So you want to go ahead and explain it?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I like how you explain it.
I love talking about the threat bucket. So, we've all been to a party or an event with those glass jars with like the little spigot, right? It's got the specialty cocktail in it. So just imagine that, right? If that cocktail gets below a certain level, when you turn on the spigot, you're not going to get anything coming out, right? So we need to look at our ability to handle threat, kind of like that bucket. We're very adaptable creatures. We can handle a lot of stress because, like Elyse was saying, stress creates releases of these hormones that allow us to survive and to take action. But when we're having, well, let's take it back. Okay. So we're adaptable. We have the ability to handle a lot. So your brain is constantly looking for those threats. So maybe that is like an actual physical threat where somebody's coming after you. That's a drop in your bucket. So that's like a little drop of the specialty cocktail, right? Lack of sleep. You're not getting fully rested. You're not recovering. That can be a drop. You're not well hydrated. You have dysfunction in your visual system. You have an inner ear issue. You have work stress. You have relationship stress. There's all these different things that your brain is looking at throughout the day And every time it detects a threat, that's a drop in the bucket. So as those drops accumulate, eventually there gets to this point where now we have enough drops that when we turn that spigot, we're going to get our specialty cocktail, and we're going to get this output, because that is, and it's generally like a physical sensation of pain, because that's saying, hey, it's like the fire alarm going off, something needs to change. And one thing to consider is all those different threats, the drops of the like specialty cocktail are different sizes. So, you know, like that work stress might be a larger drop in the bucket for myself than it is for Elyse. So it's very individual in that regard. And then other ones are smaller. You know, maybe you only got like 7 hours of sleep instead of 8, so it's a smaller drop. So, but when we get that output of pain, it's saying, okay, we're over our threshold. What can we take out of the bucket? Because we can't take everything out. That's unrealistic, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And one thing that comes to mind while you're talking was when it comes to this bucket and all the things that you know, all the stresses and the things that can, you know, fall into that. Do you think that um technology and just the world, like how rapidly things are paced and move within our society today, has kind of accelerated and added on to that bucket?
Elyse, you want to take this
Yeah,
one?
no, definitely. I mean, I think in many ways, right? Not just in the sense that we are, first of all, we're comparing ourselves constantly to other people, which gives us a poor sense of self, right? Like we don't understand that what we're seeing, like when we're in groups, when we're in tribes, right, in communities, we understand ourselves in relationship. And now we're seeing things that aren't really realistic, right? Because we're really only seeing people's good stuff that's happening. And now we're comparing ourselves to that, which can lead to things like depression, because we now have this skewed perception of what life is supposed to look like. So in that way, we're constantly, Sarah and I did an IG live yesterday on the need to constantly fill time and fill space with like go, right? Like if I'm not doing something right now, I should be on my phone checking my emails, or I should be posting something on Instagram. We touched a lot on that yesterday. And then also another thing that comes to mind is uh you know, Sarah and I talk about a lot about the visual system. When we are on technology all day every day, we are looking at a screen, we're looking at our phone, our eyes are in something called convergence. They're looking in and down, which is activating more certain cranial nerves more than others, probably more than they should be activated, which is going to change some stuff going on neurologically in the brain. When you're constantly looking at a screen, you're constantly looking at someone 2D that you should be seeing 3D. And there's going to be a lot of impact on the visual system, and hence the overall nervous system, because of how important the eyes are on the body. And those are just a few of the ways that technology is adding more drops into the threat bucket.
It's
Well,
so
yeah, and
funny. Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry, I was just going to add to that, you know, when we're on our devices, it changes our posture. And when we're holding things, we're fixated, and like your joints need to move. And so when we're not getting movement of our joints, we're not activating those receptors. The brain, you know, starting to lose its connection to those areas. So that is a threat. Like, and then the other one is that it becomes habitual, right? When you're at the doctor's office, you're not sitting down reading a magazine, you're just going to your phone, and it's mindless. So we just get sucked into this habit of distracting ourselves instead of being present in our lives. And so, you know, there's less brain activation when you're mindlessly doing something, and the brain needs fuel and activation to survive. So it's not getting activation, huge threat.
No, yeah, absolutely. I I work from home, hate it. I hate not being around people. One thing that's really interesting is like when like I talk to different people at my job, you know, you get very different responses in regards to how they're liking, you know, the new setup. It's like some people are like, I love it. I never want to go back to the office ever again. And then I'm just like it's convenient, I guess. I don't have to like, pay for a Metro card anymore, but I don't like it. I like being around people. I like being able to walk outside and get fresh air and, you know, just be around people. I never thought that I would say that I miss getting on a crowded, disgusting train, but I definitely do. I have been on the train a few times, but I'm nowhere near as much
It's
as I used to.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's different. Um, One thing that popped into my head while you guys were speaking was I remember David Bowie. It had to be like in the '90s, like of all people, David Bowie. He predicted this whole thing. He was like, the internet is gonna like change the world, like you don't even imagine, like you can't even conceive. Like there's a video. Anyone listening, look it up on YouTube. David Bowie internet. Like years ago, 30 plus years ago, he talked about this visionary. It's so true. The internet has just completely like fucked our brains up. And I think like there's definitely like a lot of positives to it, but as far as whether the positives or the negatives, like which one outweighs which, I feel like that's debatable. There's this evolutionary biologist by the name of Brett Weinstein, and he was on his podcast once having a conversation, and he said something that I found really interesting. He was saying how um, when you look at, and it kind of touches on like what you were saying, Elise. He was like, when you look at human beings that used to live more like tribally, where like those just like small groups, like psychologically, they were in a better place than we are, because all that you had to compare yourself to, all that you could like look at, were the people near you. That's all that was there to compare. He's like, now with the internet, now with social media, you have every single like there's someone across the globe who you've never met, who's like living an unrealistic lifestyle that has nothing to do with you, that you now have aspirations to achieve. And there's nothing wrong with having aspirations, but
Hmm.
it's almost as if you're being brainwashed, because would you have even had those aspirations if not for this tiny, machine that's like algorithmically showing you shit that you don't need and you probably wouldn't have even wanted before seeing it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting
Well,
point.
and the problem is it's yeah, and it's curated. Like you don't know the truth behind that. And Elise and I were talking about this on our live yesterday. I had some posts that I was getting a lot of comments on, but people don't realize that I was crying myself to sleep at night because I was so depleted trying to keep up with the consistent posting and making sure that the editing looked really great and the verbiage was correct. And we show the people the parts of ourselves that we like, just like on a first date, right? You're not gonna you're not
Yeah.
gonna unload your baggage. And that's what we do on social media. Like, I mean, I think a lot more people are starting to get vulnerable. But back to the algorithm, you're shown what you follow. Like I see a lot of vulnerable, like open, medically related stuff because that's what I look at. So that's what I get shown. So
I, I
it's
I
not honest.
I see a lot of like snacks, and yeah, the algorithm knows my name. That's one thing. Like I'm in advertising, but I'm not like on like social media advertising. But I gotta say, social media advertising is on point. Like I got advertised roasted peanuts the other day. I can't stop thinking about roasted peanuts. I got advertised this like Asian like spicy sauce.
Ooh,
I can't stop thinking about it. Like
sounds good.
yeah, it's like this like, and like it was a perfect ad. They're like, you could put it on pasta, you could put it on pizza, you could put it on eggs. I'm like, oh my god, I want like I just had eggs. I want to put this fucking Asian like chili crunchy sauce on my fucking eggs.
And you know
Like,
how this stuff works because of your job.
yeah, yeah,
Like, yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
They
But
got you.
like, yeah, but the thing is, like, and like this is my stance when it comes to ads, and like obviously my opinion's a bit biased, but at the same time, I'm like the most judgmental person when it comes to advertising and like doing things like from like a pharmaceutical standpoint, other things like that. But I think that when you're advertised something that's super relevant, I think it's great. But
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
when like you're bombarded with garbage and like things that just is not applicable, or that's harmful, like that's where I'm like, no. But like,
Yeah.
hey, it worked. So,
Well, and that brings up another point of like why technology can create additional stress is because you're constantly, you want to work harder, you want to push yourself further because you need these things because they're going to make you happy. You see the people in the ad and they have this life and look, it's great, it's wonderful. So we end up chasing things, and that takes a lot of work to make the money to be able to do that.
right. So I'm curious, what are your stances then on, I guess, just the capitalistic structure of our society? What's your POV on that?
Mine.
Yeah, like from an aspect of, I guess, just is it good, is it bad, as far as pain and just the way in which we function. Do you think that it's helpful, harmful, in between?
I think everything, I mean, anything can be taken to an extreme where it's harmful, right? And that's where I think, when we were talking about our devices, a lot of it comes down to like, do you use technology for good or bad? It comes down to the user, right? I think that my stance on that right now is that the way in which we try to reach people in our marketing is, I think it's predatory in a way. And you're preying on people's desires and their weaknesses. And I mean, there's, I forget that I should know this. It's skipping my mind right now. Elyse, maybe you can help me with this. There is a thing in the brain that where if something instantly changes in your environment, you're going to stop and you're going to notice. So that's why like animals, before a tsunami hits, they can sense the change in the environment and they're going to move, right? So in video advertising and in movies and in shows, they play on this. Next time you watch anything on TV, try to count to 5 before the scene changes. You can't count to 5 because they're constantly changing your environment to keep your attention. And that is creating an over release of something. So we have this survival mechanism that is now being used, and marketers use this. Dr. Cobb has talked about this, and Dr. Cobb is the founder of C Health. He's talked about this in our seminars and our courses. Is they know that the survival instinct exists and they use it to make money, and that's where I have a problem. But I get it, like we all need to make money, but there's a line and it's thin.
Wow. So it sounds like capitalism, okay, crony capitalism, not so okay.
I would agree with that.
Bingo.
Definitely.
You well said.
Especially when you've created a system where, people, it's so much harder to attain a certain amount of wealth, right? Like that's going to cause people pain because now you are breaking your back. Like, I think that term is appropriate here to get to where you need to be, right? You can't just go to work and go to a 9-to-5 job and make enough money to survive, right? Like that's just like not easy anymore, unless you have a job that pays you, I don't know, in New York City, at least $250,000, right? Like it's just not, you can't, housing is too, right? Housing is expensive. Food is expensive. Food prices I hear are going up right now, right? Like these things are really hard to just to maintain a healthy lifestyle is nearly impossible in this country. And that's where I 100% agree with both of you is that I think crony capitalism is an issue. But just as an aside, when you were asking that, I think I do not know this information. I don't think we've talked about it, Sarah. I'm really curious to see like what pain looks like in countries that aren't capitalist.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
that would be super
yeah.
interesting to research. Yeah.
Well, so it's really interesting is that in, I think it was they say just in general, like there's an estimation on the CD, you can find this information on the CDC's website that roughly like 20% of adults in the US suffer from chronic pain. And it is more prevalent amongst those who are of a lower socioeconomic status, ones that have below like or a high school or lower education, and those who have public health insurance.
Wow. And how does that well, I guess I'm not sure if you guys know this, but like that percentage, does that feel high, you think, in comparison to other countries?
I would have to look at it. I haven't looked at the comparison.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd be curious.
But I would imagine that you mean like compare like the amount of pain, like how like the percentage of people in this country who have pain.
Yeah.
I, I would imagine that the percentage of people who have chronic pain in this country is in line with the percentage of people who have chronic illness, because I really think they go hand in hand.
I see.
So I would think that I would guess that we probably have more chronic pain than other countries because we definitely have more chronic illness than most countries.
Right. Well,
You know,
one thing that I found interesting, uh like I forgot where I read this, but like there's this comedian who was like just talking about like what's going on right now in the Middle East, and like, you know, how he like, you know, was just reminiscing about like trying to perform stand up there, and like how like he had to like end up doing it virtually due to like, you know, like laws and like what was going on at the time when he went there. And he was like talking about how like he ended up performing for these refugees who are, you know, who basically have no home, have nothing. And while like after he was performing and speaking with them, the like they were talking about Flint and how, you know, they like, because at the time like they're still going through the, and I'm not sure if they're even if they're still going through the whole water thing, but at that time they still were. And it's like these people are going through their own shit, have no home, like the place that they used to know as home has been destroyed, that they don't know where they're going to go. And they were asking about what's going on in Flint and what they could do. And I don't know, one thing that just like strikes me, like when I have conversations on this or like when I read things, there just seems to be uh a different, I guess, perspective as far as our place in the world when you look at it through the lens of someone in Western civilization and everyone else. I feel like here it's very, very focused on the individual, and it's less about like um you know, the entirety of like, you know, the nation or the world. But then like other places there's a bit more of a, I guess, like, and I don't know if it's because sometimes other places are a bit more homogenized, so that kind of incentivizes you to have that different perspective. But there seems to be a bit more of a recognition that this thing we call life is bigger than just yourself. Well, like, what are your guys' thoughts on that? And like, why do you think that is?
want to take that one.
I mean, that's a deep question. I didn't know we were going there here.
I know that came, yeah. Good
I
question.
mean, I agree with you. I think the homogenized population is a very interesting point. That we come, you know, that we come from everywhere here in the United States. I mean, off the top of my head, I do feel like the crony capitalism does contribute to that, right? Like it's like, what do I need to do to get ahead, to make money, to survive? Um, that's what I think is probably a big driving force of that, you know, strong sense of, you know, me, individualism. I mean, also, you know, there are many countries where people live at home for a long time, and you have multi-generational homes. And I see that among friends and colleagues of mine who are first generation, and they live with their parents, or they live with their grandparents. And here, you know, we go off to college. In other countries, you know, you stay at home when you go to college, or you live at home until you get married. So, and that's a generalization. That's obviously not every other country. That's maybe a few other countries. People are spread out, right? Like people in the United States, like families, you find families all over the place, right? People move to different cities very easily. So they're away from their, the family that their core family that they were raised with.
Right.
They don't always live in the same town. So I think there is that sense of, right, if you're living alone, you move to a new city, you're living alone, you're thinking about yourself and how are you going to survive, not necessarily how's the rest of your family going to survive.
Right.
Because I think we chase opportunities, and as we all know, like opportunities are not the same throughout like cities, states, different regions of this country, where when you have other systems in place in different cultures, you have better access, maybe like I don't know if that's the word I want, but maybe it's more like an equal access to things. So maybe you don't, if you are growing up in West Virginia, you don't need to go far away to go to a specific school for what you want to study,
No, yeah,
but
totally.
there is something to be said about, when we're talking about pain in these other cultures, community is an important part of our overall wellness. And when there is this focus on the individual, we don't have the strength of community. And our culture is even changing. Just think, we went through this over positivity state where you just had to think your way into happiness, and so everybody got a trophy and everybody was told they're special. So everyone tends to think like about themselves and not as like a whole unit, as a team. And I think things are just,
No, yeah. And
that could take us down a very different road.
no, yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll say, and then we can move along. One thing, Sarah, while you were speaking, that popped into my head. I remember the first ever episode I did with Mr. M. We were talking about how, um, you know, one of the things that's shifted in our society, and you could look at it as a positive or a negative, depending on your vantage point of things, but that there seems to be um this disconnect where individuals used to seek refuge um, through religion, through going to the synagogue, the mosque, the church, and like that was an outlet for you to be able to have community, to have meaning, to have purpose. But we've shifted to the point where a lot of times people try to look towards their employer, towards their job for, not only just the compensation, but also for refuge, for, community, for all of these different things. And that's a lot to put on, an employer and for and an establishment. And it's not really built to provide all of that. And it inherently, like if that's like where you're trying to seek community, and if you don't have something to the extent of a religious organization or something to be able to seek community, it'll make you depressed.
Yeah. Well, there's a great book called Into the Magic Shop, it's one of my favorite books. It's written by a neuroscientist. His name's Dr. James Doty. And he gives really sad statistics at the end where in this country, in America, only 1 in 4 people feel like they have a single individual that they can turn to in their lives when they need help.
That's very sad.
Yeah. And
Terrible. So we feel so divided and alone, and we're all collectively experiencing very similar things if you look at it from a large scale. But we don't open up because we don't feel like we have that. And he talks about that in the book, about how we used to have this built-in community of a religious organization or
Yeah. And
what
like,
have you, and it's just gone.
yeah, and one thing that I was thinking of while you said that, like, it's kind of crazy, right? To think that, like, for instance, there could be like let's say, for instance, like a 15-year-old girl at a party, and it's like she's surrounded by people, but like she feels completely alone. And like the only thing that like she feels attached to and feels comfort from is a metal device with a screen on it that she can open up and like talk to people and do all these other things with people that she's never met, she may never meet, that are just basically avatars, and like that's considered normal.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie that I saw advertised yesterday. A friend of ours, Casey, had it on her IG story, and it's called Dear Evan Hansen, and it's going to touch on that. I mean, I was just so moved just by the trailer of
Was
That's a
that a
Broadway.
play?
That's a
Was that
Broadway
a
show.
play?
Yeah, it's a Broadway show.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Look at me, unaware of. I don't live in New York.
No, but it's a movie now. It's a movie.
I did not
now?
know it was a
They're
movie.
coming out with a movie.
Okay.
Oh wow! I
I
never
was
saw the
like
play. I heard it's
basically
good.
like
though.
I heard that it's a very
bawling
sad
during the,
but
like
good.
previews. I was like, because there are like, and it looks like, I don't know the premise of the play. I'm just hearing about this, but it looks like, you know, it touches on a theme that we feel so alone. And we think that that person who looks like very outgoing and has like this group of people surrounded, that they don't feel like that, and they feel exactly like that. So
Yeah, and I know we're going on a bunch of tangents, but this is a great conversation. Like this also makes me think of like when people are envious of celebrities and they're like, oh, like they got it, they got all this money, that like they got all these people that love them, like their lives must be like incredible. No, like I'd say 9 times out of 10, they're the most depressed person ever. Like you were saying, they'll be in a room
that
with
pressure.
hundreds of people, all that pressure. Like people love you not for who you are, but who they think you are. Like all of these things. Like it's no wonder that like the majority of like comedians and celebrities end up either alcoholics, drug addicts, killing themselves. All these things. It just blows my mind when people are like, oh, celebrities got it so good. I want to be a celebrity. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. Like, do you?
And yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the size of the gap between your authentic self and your perceived self, or the image you're trying to put out there to people, I wouldn't be surprised if the bigger the gap, the more pain, emotional, physical, whatever, someone is experiencing. Right? Because you are so far away from being true to who you are, and you're constantly putting on a show, putting on an image, and acting like somebody else, that you go home and you're like, who am I? Right? Like people don't like me for who I really am. People don't know me for who I am. It's just, that's a scary thought. And it's very similar with the images that people are putting out that we spoke about earlier on social media. And we are theoretically more connected than ever, but more isolated and more lonely than ever. And isolation drives inflammation in the body. Not to be like, so like to like, well, I'm going to bring back to the pain, but right, inflammation drives pain and illness. It drives depression. It drives anxiety. We're seeing inflammation in the gut, inflammation in the brain, right? It's all the same. The brain, you asked us earlier, what's the difference between emotional and physical pain? The brain doesn't know the difference. It is all dysfunction in the body, which is why Sarah and I take this approach to treating people as a holistic, right? A holistic, you are so many things. Your pain can be coming from so many different things that you're experiencing. Your chronic pain, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual, it can be physical, it can be inherited family trauma. But yeah, it is, I think this technology, the images, the envy, the jealousy, right? Like the more we're envious, the more we're jealous, the less gratitude we have. And the less gratitude we have, the less content we feel, and the more pain we're going to experience.
Well, and our thoughts are an input, going back to like the main function of the brain. We receive all these inputs. We have to do something with those inputs. We have to analyze it, make a decision, and then create an output. Having a thought, an envious thought, is a signal to the brain something's wrong. I don't have something that I need. And when we're constantly thinking like, I want that, I need that, we're telling our brain over and over again, something's not right. We're not safe. We don't have what we need to be good, right?
Which is once again putting us in that constant state of threat.
I'm curious because like one thing, like I feel like in general when it comes to this podcast, it's very, very spiritual, very energy focused, and different like perspectives and everything. like what are your guys' perspective on just like are like would either of you say that you believe in some form of divinity, or you know like what are your thoughts as far as just why we're here and like what the whole purpose is?
I don't think that um, life and nature and all of its miraculous occurrences could be without some sort of divinity. As someone who grew up in a very Christian religious home, I've moved away from that specific religion. But there has to be something higher at work. And I don't know what that is, but for just I've been talking a lot about butterflies. I don't know why, because it's spring, right? Like a caterpillar doesn't need to be told to become a butterfly. It does it instinctually, and it literally turns into goo and comes out this winged, beautiful creature. I mean, and we know we're energy. We're just a bunch of atoms buzzing around. So there has to be something. I don't have a specific deity or religion that I follow, but I just think there has to be something larger than us. And maybe I'll find out one day. We'll see.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Oh, are you? That's all you're gonna say, Schunkewitz?
Oh, you want me to go? I didn't know.
What the
No.
fuck?
I was just, yeah. I mean, I definitely believe in the universe. I don't. Similar to Sarah, there isn't something specific that I know is out there or that I follow or pray to. But the more I've gone on my healing journey, and come out of chronic depression and anxiety and a lot of just stuff holding me back from living my life and really enjoying the beautiful things about life, the more I feel connected to the universe. Like I don't think it's a coincidence that Sarah and I met. I mean, we had met a long time before we actually became friends and then business partners, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we've met. And
she didn't like me.
I know, that's a whole other story. That's a
Wow.
whole other story. That was not true
Damn,
at all.
Schunkewitz.
I do not come off like that.
She's a savage. She could be a savage.
It was so funny when we discovered that. But right, like I don't think it's a coincidence. I think we've developed a beautiful friendship, which really is, I think the hallmark of our friendship is vulnerability and being truly authentic selves and feeling safe with one another to do that and then share that with the world. But right, and Julian, you're in my connection, right? Like I think amazing things happen and yeah, maybe they just happen and I'm finding common themes throughout to make me feel better. Sure, perhaps, but there is still something about believing that I think gives us a sense of purpose and drive in life that is very powerful to our soul, to our psyche, to keep going on and to keep pursuing our dreams and our goals and create bonds with other people.
No, yeah, totally. I think that when I think of it, like I'd say I probably outright identify mostly as Christian, but like as far as just like the way that I perceive it, I look at it through like the Hindu and like the Buddhist lens. Like I definitely think that like it's interesting. Like I've had a conversation on this podcast about shamanism and Hinduism, and um it's just so interesting. Like I think that there is an energy to all of us, and the my friend who came on who's Hindu, one thing that he said, because he's actually an engineer, and like he like kind of tied the two together, which is really fascinating. And he was saying how one thing that we know scientifically is that energy never dies. It never dies. Energy, like when you die, like that energy there, it doesn't just disappear. It just turns into something else. And I think that when we're talking about pain and we're talking about emotion, like I think that at times we take for granted the energy that you put out, like when you're showing love, or when you're showing anger towards someone, and like you can feel it, like even if like someone is just like stressed and upset, and like they come into a room, and like you can feel that energy and like the impact that it'll have, whether they're doing something negative or positive. It's like it's inconceivable, the fact that that's something that we're capable of. And like to your point, Sarah, as far as just a butterfly, just
Yeah.
becoming a butterfly, and like all these things, like yeah, like I don't have the answers, no one does, but I think that that like there's just such precision in regards to like the way in which things work, even our bodies. It just
Yeah.
it can't just be a coincidence, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, our ability to heal ourselves and to heal each other is incredible. I mean, they've done studies where biologically a certain length of an embrace with another person will change your biology.
That's crazy.
That's incredible. Like at each lobe of your brain vibrates at a different frequency. Like
Wow.
it's incredible. Science.
Science, yeah. Do you guys want to touch on the Neuro Matrix?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it kind of like plays into the idea of the threat bucket. It's there's some key concepts that come into play when we're looking at pain, because as we were saying, like pain, it was generally believed that pain only lived in like one specific area, and there's a lot of misinformation about like, oh, my back hurts because I need surgery, or I slipped a disc, or I did this, right? But there's different concepts within that neuro matrix that show it's a bigger picture, right? So as we said, one of those concepts that we've been talking about is that pain is an output. Um, it is a signal of threat. That it's an action signal, threat signal, as I was saying. And there's not a single center in the brain that deals with pain. Another concept is it's very individual because it's the perception of threat. So based on your existence up until this day, your perception of pain is going to be different than the person sitting next to you, because your history is different. So a person that has constantly lived in danger, grew up in an abusive household, their perception is going to be different than what your idea of a threat and pain are, because they know perhaps a more violent lifestyle. So it's very individual. So there's a lot of different concepts that go into that. But I think the big picture that wraps that all up is that idea of the threat bucket of different threats going into the bucket at different sizes. And the different sizes, as I said earlier, depend on your perception of it. What has been your life experience?
So like I guess tying it all together, like when like you look at like this matrix and the bucket, and how every individual, through their experiences and through how they were raised and everything, will really truly mold how they perceive pain, like what level of pain they end up having to deal with and everything. Like I guess tying that with like how we were talking about, our our thoughts on divinity, and this being something that's grander than anything that we conceive. Do you think, like, where does pain fall into that? Do you think that in some sense uh that pain is there for a reason, and that there's like something to be learned from it, or like what are your thoughts?
I think I said this in an IG live that Elyse and I did after a workshop. I said, I love pain because it's such a fabulous teacher. I think, as with any challenge we experience in life, it gives us, like, I love to fail. I love to fail because it allows me to learn. It allows me to grow as an individual. I said something, I was rock climbing this past week and I came down and a climber who wasn't with my group said, "Oh, you did great." I said, "It wasn't my best performance." And I said, "But you know what? I never want it to be my best performance, because that means that I have nowhere to evolve. I have no further growth if that was my best performance." So I kind of look at pain the same way. It's a great teacher. Through my own, I've experienced physical pain, and I've experienced like emotional pain that manifested in my body. But without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to heal that trauma that was passed along to me. I wouldn't have been able to grow in my relationships with others. It's helped me become a better person. It's given me a different perspective. I think that's why I enjoy pain so much, and I enjoy working with others in pain, because it is isolating, and it makes you feel a little crazy, because you go to the doctors and the doctors are not giving you an answer, and you're trying all these different methods and you lose hope, right? And so, because I have this understanding through my own experience, but also from what pain is from a scientific standpoint, I can then give my clients what they need. I can be their hope. I can be their support. I can be their guide through it. And, I had a client today who was saying, "You're the first person, Sara, that's made me feel understood. I've seen doctor after doctor after doctor, and I thought I was crazy. They looked at me like I was an idiot. But you, and the way that you look at it as like a whole system, like I've never been treated like that before." And, that gives people hope. And we want to live a pain-free life. We want to participate. Life is fragile. Life is short. It's very limited time that we get on this planet. So we want to be able to enjoy it to the fullest extent. And pain prevents that.
Schunkewitz, what's your POV?
Yeah, I love that, Sara. I mean, there's not much more to add to that, but really, pain is part of life, unfortunately, right? If you're not experiencing pain ever, excuse me, you're not living, right? And even if you aren't living, you're probably going to, like, if you're not living, if you're sitting at home all day doing nothing, you're probably going to experience pain too, right? But if you constantly look for ways to avoid pain, you're not experiencing the beauty and the joy of life, because the reality is that that's part of it. It is a learning. It is something that we learn from, but it's also, it teaches us that we're actually alive because we're experiencing emotion or experiencing physical sensation, right? We know that there is no high highs without the low lows, right? Like you could be in the most incredible whirlwind romantic relationship that makes you feeling like absolutely amazing. And then you can break up and feel like absolute crap and like the worst pain of your life. Right. So, but that's life. That's part of it. And for Sara and me, it's not about helping people avoid pain, but it's helping them learn how to navigate it and hopefully get out of it quickly, because we don't want to teach the nervous system to stay in pain. We want to live, as best of a life as we can. Our goal is that we want people to feel good in their bodies. That's our ultimate goal, to feel like they have control of their bodies, to feel good in their bodies, to feel energized, to feel happy, to feel like alive. And we teach people how to best do that. That's what we want to do. So, yeah.
We change the relationship, because once I get a client out of pain, that's not to say that they're never going to be in pain again. But like I just wrapped up, I graduated actually a friend of Elyse's who had been in chronic pain for 6 years. And she learned the tools. She learned the tools to listen to her body and how to navigate any experience she has going forward. And so now she's in control. She's in control. She knows if anything comes up again, she knows how to address it. So she's changed the relationship. She now understands that pain is her teacher. Pain is a calling. pain is a message and she knows how to answer and respond.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing while you guys are speaking, I was thinking about in one of Jordan Peterson's books. I remember he, like, in the last chapter, like, he talks about um pain. Well, I like, this is something that, like, is kind of highlighted, I guess, throughout the whole book, but, like, really focused on in the end. Pain is just, this is part of the deal of existing. There's no way to exist
Right.
without dealing with pain. And it was kind of interesting because, like, he had a metaphor that I found really fascinating, where he basically was like, yeah, without pain, what's the point? And he goes, for example, when DC comic books released Superman, he was impervious to everything. He had no weaknesses. He could, like, just beat the bad guy every time. There was nothing wrong with him whatsoever. It got boring. They were about to like have to release Superman because nobody was interested in it. Then all of a sudden they brought out, they're like, oh, he has this weakness and he has that weakness. Now he's vulnerable. Now it's something that people can, actually relate to. Now it's something that actually has meaning and purpose. Because if there's no struggle, if there's no adversity, then what the hell is the point?
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
it's hard though to I guess think about that, especially like when you're in the weeds. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and there's a danger with that too. Like anything in life, there's a fine line because, as I said earlier, the brain learns everything that it does habitually. It creates neural pathways so we can learn pain. And when you have chronic pain, and I experienced this in my own life, as I was moving through dealing with some like emotional traumas, was I said, I was on the phone with my friend and I just broke down. I said, but who am I without my pain? Who am I? It's been my identity. So it's hard for a lot of people to heal their pain because you have to break a very strong bond with a good friend.
right. Yeah, there's that balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
of not identifying solely with the pain, realizing that's not part of you, but it is and it isn't. Like, it's something that,
Mhm.
yeah. What are your
That's why
thoughts on
we
that?
don't want chronic pain.
Right, right. Were you gonna say something, Shankowitz?
No, that's no, I that's a awesome.
So I want to end this with you guys talking about how you got out of pain personally for yourself, and then talk about your practice a little bit more, and shamelessly plug it.
Thank you.
There's no shame in that. Capitalism.
I want Sarah has more of like a experience more of like physical conventional when we talk about pain. So do you want to start with your
Sure.
story?
Yeah. So for me, I'll give you the like quick and dirty version, so to speak. I started experiencing back pain right around my freshman year of high school. Went to a chiropractor, got some asymmetries, need to adjust some things. Saw my chiropractor regularly, and then did some X-rays. A couple months later, okay, you're fine, but then I was still experiencing pain. So then I just, I kind of got tired of dealing with it, and it came and went, honestly. But it kind of came to a head my freshman year of college. And I was struggling with, like, I kind of was losing some feeling. And so, my chiropractor, who I had still seen on and off, said, okay, well, your spine looks fine. I'm going to send you to a neurologist for an MRI. And then I went to see my neurologist to go over my MRI, and I had a disc that was so far herniated into my spinal column that actually fluid wasn't flowing. So there was no ability for there to be nerve communication down to the lower left side of my body. So I was experiencing muscle atrophy, like just a lot of other things that the doctor said, if we don't do surgery, there's going to be some, like, you're going to be wheelchair bound. You're probably going to have a colostomy bag because you can't get information to your bladder and whatnot. And I was 20 years old. Like, excuse me, what? How am I going to find a husband with a colostomy bag? So I at that point, I didn't want to have the surgery, but because I was seeing that this was probably the best route, we did that. And a couple weeks before my 21st birthday, I had surgery, and then I was great until probably 8 years later. And then it was really bad again. Right before I moved to DC, my boyfriend at the time was carrying me into work. I couldn't walk. And I had tried everything. I said, I'm not having surgery this time. I was working with a really good sports medicine doctor, and we were doing like PT and the steroids. Hey, I felt great on those. As soon as the steroids were done, you can't live on steroids, and he didn't feel comfortable with that. So tried back injections. Those were okay. Then they tried a nerve block, which, that worked for like all of one day, maybe at most. I think it was a few hours. And so then the doctors were like, well, let's just cauterize your nerve. Essentially cut it. I said, whoa. And I didn't know what I knew about pain, but instinctually I thought, pain tells me something about my body, and you want to take away my ability to feel pain. And I had already been on copious amounts of painkillers. I didn't like that. It didn't solve anything. It just made me feel loopy and crappy, hallucinate in my dreams. So I opted not to do that. And I just thought, okay, this is my life now. I'm not going to run. I've been an athlete since I was 3. I can't do things. This is my life. And it was really depressing. But then when I moved to DC, I got connected with a Pilates instructor, and just moving changed me. And I think it was because I was changing the inputs. I was changing the inputs. And that is what really inspired me to start going into Pilates, because I saw how it healed my own life. And then when my mentor, who had been doing the Z Health curriculum for about 10 years, when she was doing some stuff with me, and then I did some sessions with some of the master practitioners, I thought, I need to know what just happened, because that left leg issue, I couldn't feel my foot the same for 15 years. And then all of a sudden, like, my SI joint gets manipulated. I'm like, what the heck just happened? What did you do? I need to know how this happened. So then I started doing the functional neurology education through Z Health. And then I realized why Pilates helped me, because it was moving joints, which activates mechanoreceptors, which allows information to get sent up to the PMRF, which is part of the brainstem, which releases pain inhibitors into the body. So I got a lot better understanding. So that was like my physical pain. And I still have pain from time to time, but as I said earlier, it's my messenger. And because pain is learned, when my threat bucket has too many drops, I feel it in my lower back, because that's where I know it. But then I listen, and I know how to then move forward. And it's usually 24 hours and I'm fine,
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I actually did not know that entire story, Sarah, which I feel like ashamed to admit, but I had no idea about when you were 20 years old and all that. Wow. My pain story is more so along the lines of emotional pain. And so for me, it was living with a lot of depression, anxiety, some eating disorder stuff. And I had tried so many of the conventional routes, like psychotherapy, medication management, psychiatry. And for years I was on medications. I feel like I've tried almost all of them, like every antidepressant on the market, and nothing really worked. Like, I was still depressed on them, right? Sometimes you'd feel maybe a little different, but there was never really a huge change. And I think I talked about this, Julian, when you interviewed me. I can't remember exactly, so I won't get into it too much, but I've just always been fighting to feel better and to be happier and to feel less anxious. And I was, through a series of events, like wanting to become a personal trainer at my gym, and the gym that I was a member at the time was actually the hub of Z Health trainers in Manhattan. So um, I ended up getting connected with a Z Health master trainer, and we ended up working together. She was just trying some stuff out. She had seen that a lot of people she was working with on pain and weight loss and things like that, that she saw effects also in their mental health, but she wasn't a mental health clinician. Um, and she wanted to just try some stuff on me. And at the time I was in school for my master's of social work. And I started to see changes just by like moving my eyes around, moving my vestibular system, breathing differently. Um, then she sent me to another Z Health person who also did acupuncture and massage therapy and a lot of energy healing. And I mean, every type of modality you could ever imagine. And I started to get off most of my medications. And lo and behold, I wasn't depressed anymore. Um, my anxiety went down a lot. I'm not going to say I'm not an anxious person, like still I am, but my baseline has definitely gone down a lot, which is super, super cool. And it continues to get better, right? And I continue to work on myself and heal my body. And I have a lot of, unfortunately, like a lot of things that I'm dealing with from being on medication for so long that I'm trying to detox and reverse. And I'm seeing things change, which is super cool. I see things change every week. You know, the more I put in the reps, the more I put in that work, there's new neurons being created in my brain and new pathways. And it's really, really cool. So that's kind of my healing story in a nutshell. And similar to Sarah, which Sarah didn't touch on her practice yet, but you know, my practice really caters to those people who have been through that more conventional route that's really only looking at their mind, and it's not looking at their brain and their body also. And you know, like we said, right, pain, like injury doesn't always equal pain, and pain doesn't always equal injury, and we can't always contribute the pain to one particular area. Like there isn't always one particular source in the body causing the pain. So we have to evaluate everything that's happening in that person, in that individual, to figure out what are potential things contributing to that pain. And it may be more than one. So I'm really looking at all of that in my practice. And it's really cool because people feel better, right? Like we give them tools, Sarah and me give them tools to feel better and see changes in their body instantly, but then we start to provide them with the steps for long-term change, right? How do you start to lay down those new neural pathways so you start to learn, your brain learns to get out of pain and stays that way? I mean, minus what we said, like life, part of life is getting in the experiencing pain, but hopefully you don't
Right.
have to go back to that same pain.
No, yeah, totally. And before we get to the shameless plug, one thing I wanted to get your guys' POV on, like if you had the power to like make one or two changes to the world to make it better, like what do you like what would be like the first few things that you think would need to be addressed to really make the world better?
Man.
Like in connection to pain or just in general?
Up to you, dealer's choice.
Ooh, dealer's choice.
I'll speak
Um,
I'll speak on pain, like specifically just what comes to mind in regards to pain. And Sarah and I were talking about this earlier. I I I really hope that there's more pain education out there, because I think in the United States, especially, the model around treating pain is, and I can't take credit for this analogy because I think I heard it on a podcast, right? If you have a smoke detector going off in your house, you don't rip the smoke detector off and throw it in the garbage, right? You go and figure out what is the source of the smoke detector going off. And a lot of the
Ooh, I like
yeah,
that.
it's good. It's good. Like I
isn't
said, I
that a
can't
good
take
one?
credit. I can't take credit.
Wow.
But a
Such a
lot
good
of
one.
what we do is, and this isn't just in medicine, this is also in like life, right? Creating shortcuts. Like we see this all the time. Like, right, you buy something, you buy a piece of furniture and compare it to a piece of furniture built in like the 80s, and it's just not the same, right? Like it's we're taking shortcuts, and it's really killing the long-term effects of things, right? Like we're like things aren't lasting as long. So we're so quick to extinguish the symptom of pain. And I don't think it's bad to do that. I don't think it's bad to get out of pain as fast as possible because you don't want to learn to be in pain. But we're forgetting to then go back and find that source of the pain and really go and rehab it, whether it be, you know, your the physical symptoms of pain, the emotional symptoms, right? Like, how much introspection are we willing to have, and how deep are we willing to go? Because if we're not willing to go there, we're not going to see huge progress down the road. We might feel a little bit better for the next day or two, or week or two, or maybe the next month or year, but ultimately those things are going to come back up and haunt us if they're not taken care of.
Wow, that was really good, Schunkewitz.
Thank you.
I have to follow that.
Oh, come on. There's so many things I had to follow you on here that were amazing. So.
Oh my goodness, that was really good, Elyse. So since you took it from pain and touched on the conversation that we had earlier in the day, I will look at it from a different lens. But it does tie into, and I forgot to mention how I approach pain in my practice. So maybe I'll start with that first. So because it ties into one of the things that I think is important for changing the world, being a good listener and hearing people, not shutting the lips and waiting for the person to be done talking, but really hearing them. And that's the main approach I take with my clients. I want them to tell me what is going on. I want to ask questions and dig in. I'm not just taking a comprehensive history, but before I meet with a client for the first time, I have a call with them and I go over their form and I ask them questions, and I want them to feel heard. I want them to feel understood. And, you know, a lot of what I do is rooted in movement, because movement does heal. Complicated movement, like I said, activates part of the brainstem that releases pain inhibitors into the body. But it's also taking a deeper approach. Like for me, I always go to it's called the neural hierarchy. So the brain's number one job is to survive. In order to survive, it needs fuel and activation. I'm not educated in nutrition, so I'm not going to talk to my clients about nutrition. I'll refer them out. But the other source of fuel is oxygen. So I'm going to talk to them about breathing. Okay. I'm going to activate their brain. First, I'm going to start with the visual system. There's more areas of your brain dedicated to processing visual information than anything else. Because again, our eyes allow us to see danger around us. So I'm going to assess visual, because if I can improve the visual information, I'm going to take out a large chunk of the water in that threat bucket. And then I'm going to go to vestibular system that lives in between your ears, tells you where you are in space. Okay, so I'm going to look at that. And then movement is the proprioceptive system, is what the brain then prioritizes third. So that's kind of how I approach my pain with clients. But yes, I think the number one thing how many things did you ask for? 3? Or was it just like in general?
Yeah, just in general.
Just in general, I think it is, we need to be better listeners. And I think when people feel heard, that allows them to feel safe to open up. And when people feel safe to open up, they become vulnerable. And then we understand, I have a similar story. I'm not alone. And it builds this connectivity. It builds trust. It builds community. It fosters really important relationships. So if we want to come together, because that's how, I mean, there's strength in numbers. It takes a village to raise a child, whatever. You hear it time and time again. We have to come together, and we can't come together if we're just trying to talk. We need to listen and actively listen.
Man, you guys are just killing it. Like
Yes.
the 1-2 punch here. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, one thing that was in my head earlier today, and like I kept it in my head because I thought it was worth bringing up at some point while talking to you guys. Well, first off, I remember I had a conversation with someone, and I don't like know this technically, but this is what they said. They said that love is the strongest frequency or something like that along those lines, which to me sounds right. So I'm just gonna agree with it and say it again.
It is.
Uh,
It actually is.
yeah, and I think that that kind of goes with like, it's like in the same stratosphere of, really hearing somebody, really being there and like listening and being vulnerable. I think, when I think of like the song Imagine, I think that's one of the greatest songs ever created. And it's something where like I feel like a lot of times people are just like, oh, like this is such a great song, but it's like, are you really hearing like what the song is saying? Because like I feel like the message in there is just so powerful, and it's just like really just for like showcasing like the imperative nature of putting a love above all else, and really having empathy for someone who you may not know, who may not look like you. And it's easier said than done, of course. And then the saying that was in my head that I wanted to bring up was, and I believe this is how the saying goes: hurt people hurt people.
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure.
I was just going to say that we can't love, and take this from RuPaul, can't love yourself. How the hell are you going to love anyone else? And it's true. And, understanding that hurt people has changed the way I look at people. And I work a lot with children. And I remember one of my little clients, she's 10, she was talking about, she's very anxious. And she was talking about not feeling, just feeling left out because she didn't get invited to a birthday party. And she was talking about this girl. And I said, maybe she's treating you like that because she's unhappy and she doesn't know how to deal with those emotions. So if you can just look at her with a little bit more kindness and understanding, and not look at what she's doing to you, but maybe consider what she's experiencing in her own world, maybe that'll change your relationship with her. And I think we need to try to be more understanding and more empathetic by looking at people and understanding like that the negativity that is spewing from people is often because they feel caged in this world where they don't know how to process what's going on and the emotions and the pain that they're experiencing. And if we can just come to them with love, like you were talking about that song that I love so much, but I also love What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. And if you've ever listened to him doing that live, he talks about that. Like we need to love each other more. We need to show empathy and understanding. And that's done through listening and hearing and understanding somebody else's experience.
Absolutely.
Ask more questions. That's what we need to do. Ask more questions.
Absolutely. Schunkewitz, what are your last words?
No, I can't see now. I can't go over that. That was so great. That was so great. I'm gonna second all of that. I love it.
Ditto. That's her final word. Ditto.
Wow. All right, you guys want to while we wrap it up, just I'll put it in the description, of course, but highlight your website, your Instagram, and everything.
Yeah. So we have a fun little company called Talk Nerdy to Me. Our website is currently under construction. It's been a challenge to get that ready to go with working 2 full-time jobs, but we will have that up live soon. But you can get all the up-to-date information by following us on Instagram at talk_nerdy, NEURD_2_me. And we are hosting workshops monthly where we're trying to re-educate people on how to deal with these common issues and get people excited about neurology. It's cool science.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to do this again.
Same. Thank you so much for having us. This is really fun.
Thank you.
And very thought-provoking. So I appreciate the unexpected questions.
I love the conversation. I love those tangents. Those are
really, really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And cut.